Hello guys, I hope you are well. It's been a while that I came back on my show because I wasn't feeling well. I had a bit of a health condition, but now I'm feeling better. And today when I opened Financial Times, I came across this story on what is happening between Russia, Ukraine, and the US because as we already know that the US President Donald Trump was trying very hard to bring peace in Ukraine between Russia and Ukraine. So there were a lot of complications, a lot of demands from both sides were involved. So Donald Trump has presented a 28-point peace plan to bring the war to an end in Ukraine, as he did with the 20-point plan in Gaza. So, what is this 28-point Ukraine Russia peace plan? This is a full text of that peace plan by the Financial Times. I've brought for you. Let's read it together and let's try to understand what it says. So, the first point of the plan is Ukraine's sovereignty will be confirmed, that Ukraine will keep its independence. Ukraine will exist as an independent country of the community of nations. It will not be subdued. It will not be taken over by Russia. A comprehensive non-aggression agreement will be concluded between Russia, Ukraine, and Europe. All ambiguities of the last 30 years will be considered settled. So, Russia, Ukraine, and Europe, which are the three major stakeholders in this war, they'll they'll sign a non-aggression pact that which essentially will uh, prevent these countries from fighting again or starting a war again. All ambiguities of the last 30 years will be considered settled. So, any ambiguities on both sides, on the side of Russia, on the side of Ukraine, on the side of uh, Europe, would be considered settled. It is expected that Russia will not invade neighboring countries and NATO will not expand further. Expansion of NATO was one of the very fundamental causes that Russia invaded Ukraine, and this peace plan by Donald Trump says that NATO will not expand further to the east. A dialogue will be held between Russia and NATO, mediated by the United States, to resolve all security issues and create conditions for de escalation in order to ensure global security and increase opportunities for cooperation and future economic development. Again, this is a bit of rhetoric that, everything is going to be settled down, everything is going to be resolved through mediation, through cooperation, through dialogue. Ukraine will receive reliable security guarantees. Let's see what those guarantees are going to turn out to be, but this is also another of those points. The size of the Ukrainian armed forces will be limited to 600,000 personnel. This is extremely important. This is essentially an infringement upon the Ukrainian sovereignty. But again, from a realist perspective, you have to see the realities on the ground. So, this peace plan says that Ukraine's army will be limited to only 600,000 personnel. Ukraine agrees to enshrine in its constitution that will not join NATO. Ukraine will make a law out of it that it will not join NATO, and NATO agrees to include in its statutes a provision that Ukraine will not be admitted in the future. So this is going to be enshrined. This is going to be written down in the constitution of Ukraine and in the constitution in the provisions of the charter of NATO that Ukraine is not gonna join NATO and NATO is not gonna enlarge or try to include Ukraine. NATO agrees not to station troops in Ukraine. European fighter jets will be stationed in Poland. US guarantee. Okay, so the US will receive compensation for the guarantee. I think this is about the US guarantees for the security of Ukraine. If Ukraine invades Russia, it will lose the guarantee. So, Ukraine is not going to invade Russia. If Russia invades Ukraine, in addition to decisive coordinated military response, all global sanctions will be reinstated, recognition of the new territory, and all other benefits of this deal will be revoked. So, if Russia attacks Ukraine again after this peace deal is signed, all sanctions will be reinstated. Any recognition to new territories to the territories that have been occupied by Russia that will be given recognition by the US. They will also be taken over. They will also be those recognitions will also be taken back, and a military response will be given to Russia for its invasion of Ukraine if it does so after this peace plan is concluded. If Ukraine launches a missile at Moscow or St. Petersburg without cause, the security guarantee will be deemed invalid. Ukraine is also prevented from attacking Russia. Ukraine is eligible for EU membership and will receive short term preferential access to the European market while the issue is being considered. So, Ukraine is being given economic incentives. A powerful global package of measures to rebuild Ukraine, including but not limited to the creation of a Ukraine Development Fund to invest in fast growing industries, including technology, data centers, and artificial intelligence. Again, an economic incentive, industrial incentive, so that Ukraine can be rebuilt, the industrial base of Ukraine can be rebuilt. The United States will cooperate with Ukraine to jointly rebuild, develop, modernize, and operate Ukraine's gas infrastructure, including pipelines and storage facilities. So Ukraine's energy infrastructure will be invested in and it will be developed. Joint efforts to rehabilitate war-affected areas for the restoration, reconstruction, and modernization of cities and residential areas. This is post-war development plans, infrastructure development, extraction of minerals and resources. The World Bank will develop a special financing package to accelerate these efforts. World Bank will lead these efforts. Russia will be integrated into the global economy. Sanctions will be lifted from Russia and agreed upon in stages on a case-by-case basis. So sanctions from will be lifted from Russia on a case-by-case basis and in a step-by-step process. The United States will enter into a long-term economic cooperation agreement for mutual development in the areas of energy, natural resources, infrastructure, artificial intelligence, data centers, rare earth metal extraction, projects in the Arctic, and other mutually beneficial corporate opportunities. So US will also, uh, you know, start investing in Russia. Will also invest in Russia and will also uh, integrate the more freely with the Russian economy and try to bring it into the mainstream. Russia will be invited to join the G8, rejoin the G8. So Russia will again be tried to brought into the global mainstream. Frozen funds will be used as follows. So $100 billion in frozen Russian assets will be invested in US-led efforts to rebuild and invest in Ukraine. So currently, the $100 billion frozen Russian assets that are in Western banks and European banks, they'll be used to rebuild Ukraine. The US will receive 50% of the profits from this venture. So, when the rebuilding of Ukraine will take place, when new industry is gonna be established, so that new industry is going to, when it's going to give profits, 50% of those profits will come to the US. Why? Because the US is leading the efforts to bring the war to an end, to end this war, to bring the two countries together. The remainder of the frozen Russian funds will be invested in a separate US Russian investment vehicle that will implement joint projects in specific areas. This fund will be aimed at strengthening relations and increasing common interest to create a strong incentive not to return to conflict. So, again, the whole idea of this peace plan is to bring both the countries into the global mainstream, give them economic incentives, industrial incentives, so that they don't return to the conflict. A joint American Russian working group on security issues will be established to promote and ensure compliance with all provisions of this agreement. Russia will enshrine in law its policy of non-aggression towards Europe and Ukraine. Russia will also write it down in its law, in its constitution, that it's not gonna act aggressively towards Europe and Ukraine. The United States and Russia will agree to extend the validity of treaties on the non-proliferation and control of nuclear weapons, including the START 1 treaty. So this is extremely important. START is basically Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. START stands for Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. United States and Russia will agree to extend the validity of treaties on the non-proliferation and control of nuclear weapons, so that US and Russia will cooperate on non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. Ukraine will again agrees to be a non-nuclear state. Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in 1993. It had nuclear weapons, but under Western guarantees, under uh, you know like uh, this non-proliferation regime of the world, they gave up their nuclear weapons in goodwill, but see what what is happening with them today. So yeah, so again, Ukraine agrees to be a non-nuclear state in accordance with the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons, which is the NPT. The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will be launched under the supervision of the IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, and the electricity produced will be distributed equally between Russia and Ukraine, 50-50. So the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will be used to distribute electricity between Russia and Ukraine, 50-50. Both countries undertake to implement educational programs in schools and society aimed at promoting understanding and tolerance of different cultures and eliminating racism and prejudice. Ukraine will adopt EU rules on religious tolerance and the protection of linguistic minorities. Both countries will agree to abolish all discriminatory measures and guarantees The rights of Ukrainian and Russian media and education, all Nazi ideology and activities must be rejected and prohibited. Now, this is extremely important. 21. The territories. Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk will be recognized as de facto Russian. So the US is telling Ukraine to give up all these regions. Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk. US will recognize these territories as de facto Russian. Kherson and Zaporizhzhia will be frozen along the line of contact, which will mean de facto recognition along the line of contact. So, in the areas of Kherson and Zaporizhzhia where the line of contact currently exists, it will be frozen, and the part under Russia will be de facto recognized as Russian part, and the part under Ukraine will be de facto considered as the Ukrainian territory. Russia will relinquish other agreed territories it controls outside the five regions. So Crimea, Luhansk, Donetsk will be recognized as part of Russia. Kherson and Zaporizhzhia will be also be recognized as part of Russia or Ukraine, given who controls which area. But apart from that, in addition to these five, Russia will give up the control of all territories out of these five territories. Apart from these five territories, Russia will give up control of all the territories. Ukrainian forces will withdraw from the part of Donetsk Oblast that they currently control, and this withdrawal zone will be considered a neutral, demilitarized buffer zone internationally recognized as territory belonging to the Russian Federation. Russian forces will not enter this demilitarized zone. So Russia will Russia will pull back its troops from Donetsk Oblast, and it will be demilitarized, and it will be internationally recognized as a demilitarized zone, but it will be part of internationally recognized as part of Russian Federation. After agreeing on future territorial arrangements, both the Russian Federation and Ukraine undertake not to change the arrangements by force. Any security guarantees will not apply in the event of a breach of this commitment. So, after the implementation of this plan, both Russia and Ukraine will hold this agreement, and they will not try to change it with force. If they do, these agreements, this peace plan will be considered null and void, or any guarantees that the US has given to these countries will be violated. Russia will not prevent Ukraine from using the Dnieper River for commercial activities, and agreements will be reached on the free transport of goods or on the free transport of grain across the Black Sea. Russia will allow Ukraine to use water. Commercial activities in the Black Sea will continue. A humanitarian committee will be established to resolve outstanding issues. All remaining prisoners and bodies will be exchanged on an all for all basis. Good. All civilian detainees and hostages will be returned, including children. Good. A family reunification program will be implemented. Measures will be taken to alleviate the suffering of the victims of the conflict. Ukraine will hold elections in 100 days. All parties involved in this conflict. This is again important. They want Ukraine to have free and fair elections so that a new elective representative government can be elected. All parties involved in this conflict will receive full amnesty for their actions during the war and agree not to make any claims or consider any complaints in the future. So, both Russia and Ukraine will be given full amnesty. President Putin, President Zelensky, and all soldiers and whatnot, and they will not make any claims or complaints in the future. This agreement will be legally binding. Its implementation will be monitored and guaranteed by the Peace Council headed by President Donald J. Trump. Sanctions will be imposed for violations. This is a binding agreement. It will be implemented and headed and guaranteed by the Peace Council. Who is going to head the Peace Council? US President Donald J. Trump. Once all parties agree to this memorandum, the ceasefire will take effect immediately after both sides retreat to agreed points to begin implementation of the agreement. So as soon as this agreement is accepted, ceasefire will take place, and uh, they will both sides will retreat or go back to the agreed points to begin implementation of the agreement. So this is the 28-point plan by Trump to end the war in Ukraine, which is the Ukraine-Russia peace plan. This was the full text that I brought for you. I hope you liked it, and I'll keep bringing you more. Like, share, subscribe, and yeah, that's all from my side. Have a good one.